So good evening one and all. We have started this series of neoplasia lectures, and today is our fifth lecture. What we have seen till date is definition of neoplasia, the nomenclature, and different factors which regulate the growth of a tumor. We had seen grading and staging of tumors, routes of metastasis of tumor, clinical significance, the gross and microscopic characteristics of the tumor. And in last lecture, we had started with the molecular basis of tumor, in which we had seen that basically tumors are result of multiple mutations in genes. So no single gene can directly lead to a tumor formation. So it is called a multi-hit process. So there are serial progenies of cell which go on accumulating these different kinds of mutations. So the mutations are mainly focused on 4 different categories of genes, which we have started last time. So we had covered the first 2 categories of the gene. If you remember, the first category of these genes was growth promoting proto-oncogenes, which are dominant kind of genes. So even a single mutation in one of the allele will lead to a mutant protein formation, which we call as oncoproteins. And we saw that these genes are specifically of 5 different subgroups which are related to cell multiplication. So they are related with growth factors, growth receptors, then signal transduction proteins, then nuclear regulatory proteins, and last are cell cycle regulatory proteins. So if there are mutations at multiple levels of these genes, which are proto-oncogenes, then they can lead to tumor formation. The second broad group of genes affected were growth inhibiting tumor suppressor genes, which are recessive kind of nature. So what we need is mutation in both the alleles of these genes. So taking it further, after these 2 groups, we move on to the third group of genes. So the third group of genes are basically genes regulating apoptosis. So you have all learned in your cell injury chapter that P53 gene is a gene which is major gene regulating our apoptotic process in a cell. So that's why there's a nickname for P53 as guardian of the genome. So why we call it guardian basically is, first thing is, whenever there's a damage to the DNA, means there is some kind of mutation in the DNA or a chromosome, P53 will sense it and it will stop the cell from multiplication. So it will arrest the cell in multiplication. It won't allow mitosis. Then it will stimulate our DNA repair genes. They will come in action. They will try to repair the damage to the DNA. If the damage is repairable, then after the repair is complete, they will send a signal back to the P53, and P53 will now allow the cell to multiply. If it is an irreparable kind of damage, then the same P53 will stimulate the process of apoptosis, and it will force the cell to undergo physiological death. Now, what does that do? It doesn't allow our genome to become mutated. That's why we call it as a guardian of the genome. So if DNA is damaged, P53 is basically stopping the cell cycle via retinoblastoma gene. So if you remember last time, retinoblastoma gene is one of the tumor suppressor gene. So it uses that gene and it stops our cell cycle, so DNA can be repaired. But if it is irreparable, then the cell should die. Now what happens? If I say the P53 itself is silenced or inactivated by a mutation, so now what will happen? This basic action of P53 won't occur. And because of that, the cell will not be arrested. It will still further proceed with mitosis. And once it undergoes mitosis, the next progeny will have stable mutated genes. That's why most of the human tumors will show P53 mutations. So when we study P53 mutations in different kind of tumors, we see that more than 50% of the tumors, they show a frank P53 mutation. So if we see what P53 exactly does, let us take an example with this diagram from Robbins, that this is a normal cell, and because of either radiations or chemical carcinogens or mutagens or viruses, there is some kind of mutation occurring in the DNA, or there is some damage to the DNA. Then the P53, it binds to the DNA, it gets activated. Now this P53 activates P21, which is cyclin D kinase inhibitor. So that will arrest the cell cycle in G1 phase. Once the cell cycle is arrested, then it will stimulate GAD45, which is a DNA repair gene, which will stimulate all the DNA repair genes. So they are a group of genes. It is not a single gene. Okay, it is stimulated, or you can say it is channelized through GAD45. So they will start acting upon the damaged DNA and they will try to repair it. If the repair is successful, then the P53 will allow, it will remove this arrest and the cell is allowed to multiply. Unfortunately, if this repair is cannot be corrected, then the same P53 will stimulate Bax gene, which is an apoptotic gene, and that will force the cell to undergo apoptosis, which is we call as physiological death of the cell. So there is a normal, absolutely normal physiological process which occurs in our body. Now imagine a scenario where there's again a DNA damage, but the P53 unfortunately is not activated because it is mutated. So if it is mutated, it is not going to arrest the cell. So in lack of arrest of cell, even if the DNA repair genes are normal, they're not getting a chance to repair the DNA. And the cell will multiply. If it multiplies, then the progeny becomes mutant cells carrying the mutated DNA. And when they start multiplying, they will form a malignant mass. So now in our body, we have both pro-apoptotic and anti-apoptotic genes. So some of the important proteins that are involved in apoptosis, first is FAS, that is also called a death receptor. Next is executioner caspases, which will cut the DNA into multiple pieces. Then BCL2 protein family and P53. So if there are mutations, single or multiple, in these particular genes regulating these proteins, definitely the cell will become abnormal because it allows unregulated multiplication of these cells carrying the mutations in further progeny. So let us see some of these important genes related with apoptotic cycle. So as I said, there are anti-apoptotic genes like BCL2 and BCLXL. So what does that mean? If there is overactivation of these particular genes, like BCL2 is very commonly seen with lymphomas. So if you are going to overactivate these genes, what they will do? They won't allow the cell to die. So they won't allow apoptosis. In spite of that, they will force the cell to undergo multiplication. So in a way, they are making the cell immortal. Opposite to this, there are pro-apoptotic genes. So like BAD or BAX or BID or BCLXS. Now if these genes are active, they force the cell to undergo apoptosis. But unfortunately, when these genes get mutated, they get inactivated. So either inactivation of these genes, which are pro-apoptotic, or overactivation of the genes, which are anti-apoptotic, will have the same effect. They will allow the cell to multiply carrying the mutated DNA and not permitting arrest of the cell for a proper DNA repair. So now there's a fine balance between these genes which are regulating this apoptotic process. Like BCL2 is an anti-apoptotic, BAX is a pro-apoptotic gene. So if there's a P53 activation and the DNA is not repairable, it will upregulate the BAX activity and put the cell into apoptosis. This should normally occur physiologically. Unfortunately, I say P53 is mutated, then the BCL will get upregulated and that will start proliferation of the cells. So they start accumulating newer and newer mutations. So now the next step is basically we had seen similar diagrams when we saw different kinds of proto-oncogenes that are growth promoting genes. So now there is activation of an oncogene coding for factor BCL2. So what has happened? BCL2 is basically an anti-apoptotic kind of gene. So you have overactivated this particular gene, it will avoid the cell death. So it has avoided apoptosis. So the factors which will be produced by this BCL2 will be in a larger amount. What they do? They block the signals which are coming from the surrounding cells, which force the cell to undergo apoptosis. And because of that, the cell becomes immortal. It starts further multiplication. So apoptosis in a normal cell is guided through CD95 receptor. So that's why CD95 is also called as death cell receptor. Just like what we have seen CDs in T lymphocytes or B lymphocytes, we have a CD95 that is present on all cells of our body. If that is stimulated, the cell will be going into the phase of apoptosis. So if BCL2 gene is getting overactivated, typically that we see in lymphomas, as I said, and CD95 inactivation is seen in hepatocellular carcinoma. So the next important thing is, so one is we have evaded the apoptosis with the help of mutation of these genes. So you have stimulated anti-apoptotic and you have suppressed pro-apoptotic genes. The second thing is avoiding cellular aging. If you remember in my first lecture, I said that there is something called biological clock, which is present in each and every cell of our body. And what is this clock? This clock is basically the telomeres. So telomeres are the terminal tips of our chromosomes, and they go on shortening with every mitosis of the cell. So in short, I can say that the telomere get exhausted after 60 to 70 mitosis of a cell. So a cell may multiply 60 to 70 times in a lifetime. Okay. After that, it is bound to undergo apoptosis. Why? Because the telomeres will get exhausted. And what is the role of these telomeres? Telomeres basically avoid the fragility of DNA. So they are protecting our chromosomes and DNA from getting disintegrated. And this DNA or chromosomes are most fragile during the phase of mitosis. So that is what you can say, they are protected by telomeres. Now telomere to some extent can be regenerated with the help of telomerase RNA enzyme, but not fully regenerated. Okay, some part will be definitely lost. So this helps to repair and maintain the normal length in successive cell division. But what is the problem is, in physiology, telomerase enzyme is in a limited quantity. So there is not a continuous supply of this enzyme. So definitely with every division of a cell, some part of a telomere will be lost. Now in cancer cells, what is happening is there is upregulation of this telomerase activity. So definitely some gene is going to regulate the release of this telomerase enzyme. So if you overactivate that particular gene, what will happen? It will rebuild the telomere which is lost with every mitosis. So that now there is no biological clock which is counting the number of mitosis. Why? Because telomere is getting regenerated every time. And that puts the cell finally into immortal cancer cell. Today, most of the world which is working upon immortality for humans, they are targeting these telomeres and they're trying to synthesize it de novo. And if they succeed in doing so, maybe in future you may say that humans are immortal. So they won't die because you are not allowing the aging process in the cells. Today, as I said, after the age of 25, catabolism overtakes anabolism and the aging process starts in all the tissues of our body. So as I said, this is a chromosome, and that if you see the tips of these chromosomes, they contain these telomeres. So what are chromosomes made up of? Definitely they are nothing but coiled DNA. So the last tip of the DNA are the telomeres, which are not carrying any particular function, but basically they are robust part of the DNA, which avoid the damage to the fragile part of the DNA. Now, whenever the cell is going to multiply, with each multiplication, some part of this telomere is lost. So maybe after 50 or 60 or 70 cycles, the telomere is completely lost, and now the fragile part of the DNA is getting exposed during mitosis, and this will disintegrate the DNA. So it will put the cell into apoptosis. That's why you will see that the aging cells will be forced to undergo apoptosis, right? So it is not the new cell which is formed is undergoing apoptosis. The senile cells, they undergo apoptosis. So now what happens when the telomerase is getting formed in excess? So whatever has been damaged from the telomere end of the DNA double helix structure, this telomerase enzyme will act like a template and it will rebuild that much portion of the telomere which is lost. So it will regenerate the telomere again, as if nothing has been happened, or the cell is juvenile again, that there is no biological clock telling that how many times this cell has multiplied. Just to give an example, the tumor cells, they are used in virology labs throughout the world. And like, for example, HeLa cells, if you have heard this word, similar kind of cells which originated from renal tumors or which originate from animal tumors, they have been cultured n number of times, and these are the cells which have this capacity of telomerase, so they are immortal, and they are used in virology labs to culture viruses, because for viral culture we need animal cells or human cells. So that is an example. Even de novo, these cells don't die. So with that, next come is the fourth group of our genes which we have seen, that are DNA repair genes. So God is great. What it has done, it has given us three different levels. That if, okay, there is damage to our DNA, at three different levels there are check systems. So the first level was tumor suppressor genes. So if the DNA is damaged, they will arrest the cell cycle and they won't allow further multiplication. Okay, that's why we said tumor suppressor genes. The second level are our apoptotic genes, which block the cell cycle and allow the DNA repair genes to act. The third level of check is our DNA repair genes. So whatever damage occurs, now damage is bound to occur. Why? As I said, damage is through free radical generation. And you have seen in cell injury that free radicals are continuously generated in our cell by different mechanisms. So they are bound to cause damage. So damage to our DNA is a continuous process through our lifelong. But whatever damage is caused, the cell is arrested in a cell cycle by apoptotic gene like P53, and now the DNA repair genes will cause repair to the damage. But unfortunately, if there's a mutation in this DNA repair gene system, what we have seen in hereditary tumors, that all the recessive kind of autosomal heredity neoplastic syndromes like hereditary non-polyposis colon cancer or ataxia telangiectasia or xeroderma pigmentosa or Bloom syndrome, where we get multiple tumors of skin or leukemias or lymphomas or solid tumors in the body. The basic defect is there's a defect in DNA repair. Now, if there's a defect in DNA repair, though the cell is arrested in a cell cycle, but the DNA is not getting repaired. So it will be forced to undergo apoptosis. Now there's one mutation already present. The moment there's a mutation in the apoptotic genes like P53, now there's a mutation. There is no stopping of the cell cycle. On top of that, there's no DNA repair. So such cell will accumulate different kind of mutations at a very fast rate compared to normal cells. And because of this, the patients who genetically carry DNA repair gene defects will develop multiple tumors and at much earlier age compared to rest of the population. So now how these mutations are occurring, as I said, there's a failure of the DNA repair. We are getting constantly exposed to mutagenic agents like UV light or radiations or chemicals. Now we don't get many cancers. Why? Because normally our DNA is getting repaired. So we are lucky enough to have genotypically normal DNA repair genes. So there are many systems of the DNA repair in our body. But if we inherit or a patient inherits any defect in these systems, now these are the group of people who are more prone to get cancers. So examples of hereditary DNA repair defects, like for example, hereditary non-polyposis colon cancer, where we get multiple polyps that are formed in colons, and these polyps are basically adenomas to start with, because they are multiple and there is a high rate of multiplication of these cells. They go on accumulating more and more mutations, and finally they'll end up into adenocarcinomas. So basically there is a failure of mismatch repair genes, or you can say there is mutation of these genes. So what are these genes? Basically they are spell checkers, means they check the damage in the DNA. So whatever the sequence of nucleic acids has been changed, that is repaired by this DNA repair genes. So if they are mutated, then there's no spell checker occurring in the DNA, and it will go unnoticed and the cell will multiply. So inherit one mutation of this particular group of genes. They may acquire further, as I said, with multiplications because they're causing multiple adenomas in the GI tract. The second example is xeroderma pigmentosum, where we get multiple skin tumors like SCCs and basal cell carcinomas, to some extent even melanomas. So here basically there's failure of nucleotide excision repair system. So again, a different type of DNA repair gene systems. So in such cases, with sun exposure, because of UV radiations, it leads to multiple skin cancers at younger age compared to rest of the population. So this is what we have seen, 4 groups of genes altogether. Now let us see the example how they act actually. So suppose somebody is genetically carrying a single mutation, that is germline mutation, inherited. So that is APC gene is getting affected. Now APC is basically a tumor suppressor gene. So if this is mutated, now we know that if you mutate a tumor suppressor gene, they get inactivated. So that allows unchecked action of growth promoters. So that is first level which the patient is carrying. Now later on, there's methylation abnormalities and inactivation of a normal allele. So these are recessive gene, right? APC is a recessive gene. So the second allele got a second hit, and that too again become mutated. So now this recessive genes, both alleles got mutated. Their action is removed. Now third hit, that is a proto-oncogene mutation. It becomes an oncogene, KRAS mutation. What was a RAS gene? RAS gene basically leads to transduction protein formation. So now that starts unchecked proliferation of this mucosal epithelial cells. So they form an adenoma, a benign tumor of GI tract. Further, now this accumulates P53 mutation, LOH mutation, SMAD2 and 4 mutations. So that will now further cause proliferation as well as hyperchromasia, you can say chromosomal abnormality in a cell, and now the tumor converts into malignancy. On top of that, what it has acquired? It has acquired telomerase activity. The moment it acquires telomerase activity, the tumor cells, they become immortal. So now the tumor is going to spread at a very fast rate. So now let us see that once it has acquired all these mutations, what is most important? Nutrition. The cells are multiplying, I agree, but they need a good nutrition or supplement at the same time, or else they will start undergo necrosis. So that's why neovascularization is equally important for a tumor to flourish. And we have already seen that we have angiogenesis factors and anti-angiogenetic factors. So angiogenesis factors are basically growth factors like vascular endothelial growth factors or beta transforming growth factor or fibroblastic growth factors. And inhibition is by anti-angiogenesis factors like thrombospondin 1 or angiostatin, endostatins, vasculostatins. So if there's a balance between these two factors, I say that the promoters should be more in concentration compared to inhibitors. So there's a good vascularization of the tumor. So remember that vascularization becomes equally important after the mutations. So they are the factor which will decide the rate at which the tumor will proliferate. So all these mutations which we saw in last and today's lecture, that forms the molecular basis. Now these mutations will occur because of 3 different mechanisms. So we will see the first mechanism, that is chemical carcinogenesis. Means there is some chemical entering in the body through different routes. And if they are in a position to cause these mutations in the genes, we call them carcinogenic chemicals, right? So when somebody says that this is a carcinogen, he's trying to say that this is a chemical which has a potential to cause carcinogenesis or mutations in our genes. Now, there are a few very typical characteristics of chemical carcinogens. First and foremost, very important, there is a lot of exposure over the years. Means a single exposure to a carcinogen will not lead to tumor formation. So we need a prolonged exposure to this chemical. The best example is like smoking. What we say? We count smoking in pack years. What do you mean by 1 pack cigarette? Means 10 cigarettes a day. And somebody says that the patient has a history of 10 pack years. Means he is smoking 1 pack of cigarette each day for last 10 years. So that is the exposure level. other patient is 20 pack years. One patient is 1 pack year. So naturally, the patient with 20 pack years will have more probability of developing oral or lung cancers compared to 1 pack year. So here the exposure duration is definitely important in chemical carcinogenesis. Second is the dose related. As I said, one patient gives an history of 1 cigarette a day, another is giving a history of a pack of cigarette, means 10 cigarettes a day. So the dose will be higher in the number of packs are increasing. So more the chemical entering the body, more chances it will hit and generate more free radicals and cause more damage to our DNA. Third and very important is mode of administration. As we saw in last epidemiology of tumors, that in India, tobacco is chewed more in form of gutka or canny or slackline and so on. So because of that, there's a direct contact of oral mucosa with all the carcinogens present in tobacco. And because of that, we get more of oral cancers. Opposite of that, the European countries, what they have more of smoking. So the smoke is going in the bronchi and alveoli. That's why bronchial and alveolar means lung cancers are more common in European countries compared to the Asian countries. So what has happened? The mode of administration of that chemical has changed. Similarly, if something is coming in contact with skin, maybe some heavy metals, okay, or some carcinogenic elements, so they will cause more of skin cancers. Something is ingested, going in the GI tract, it will lead more to the GI cancers. Something reaching from GI to the liver and getting metabolized in liver, it will have more exposure to the liver chemical. So it will lead to hepatocellular carcinomas. Something is getting excreted through kidneys or detoxified in kidneys. Now the kidney is attaining more concentration of that chemical compared to stomach. So kidney will have more chances of developing that tumor. So that's why the mode of administration and the chemical where it is getting activated in the body are equally important to decide the site of tumor formation. Last and most important is individual susceptibility. Now this we have to understand because this plays a very vital role, that if I expose 100 patients to a similar kind of chemical, not all are going to develop that tumor. So why people behave differently or why the tumor are behaving differently? We have to understand this. First is whether all those 100 are carrying same genotype. Definitely no. So some may be carrying some kind of DNA repair defect. Some are carrying some mutation in the tumor suppressor genes. Some are carrying a baseline mutation in the proto-oncogenes. Some are carrying absolutely normal genes, right? So there is definitely inborn variation in our genotypes. That is one thing. Second is now, what is the rate of metabolism of a particular chemical in our body is variable from person to person. Let us take an example of alcohol. What we say in alcohol, there are fast acetylators and there are slow acetylators. Means the acetaldehyde, which is a metabolite of alcohol, will be formed at the rate at which the enzyme is present in our liver. So those which have higher level of acetaldehyde degrading enzyme, what will they do? They will convert alcohol or methanol or ethanol at a faster rate into acetaldehyde. Now acetaldehyde is more toxic to hepatocytes compared to alcohol. And because of this, what will happen? The fast acetylators will have high concentration of this acetaldehyde in their body compared to slow acetylators. Okay, and because of this, the susceptibility will be variable. Now we know that there are some enzyme-inducing drugs. Okay, so when they induce the enzymes in the liver, same thing. If the liver is going to detoxify some kind of chemical, and if the metabolite is more active carcinogen compared to the original chemical, then those who are having more induction of the enzymes will have more concentration of the metabolite compared to a person with low levels of enzymes. That's why there's a variable individual susceptibility to same dose and same concentration of a particular carcinogen. And that's why we will have variation in occurrence of cancer with people with similar kind of exposure. Now there are two major steps in chemical carcinogenesis. So step one is initiation and step two is promotion. What do we mean by that? There are some chemicals which will actually cause mutation in a cell or a DNA. Those are called initiators. So a chemical which has a capacity to generate free radicals or cause direct toxic damage to the DNA are initiators. Okay, while the chemicals which themselves are not carcinogenic, means they cannot mutate a DNA, but they will stimulate a cell containing mutated DNA to proliferate. Those are called promoters. Okay, so this concept has to be very clear. So how these two factors they act, or these two chemicals they act in our body? So always the first action has to be of initiators. Okay, so initiators have to act first. Promoter can't act in absence of initiator. But we need both. Why? Because initiator will cause the mutation, but promoter is the one which will cause proliferation of the cell. So neither of this alone may cause cancer. But the thing to remember is initiators are actually carcinogens. They cause mutations. Okay. So there's an initiator acting, like a person is smoking, for example, or a person is chewing tobacco, and there's a carcinogen in that. So what it has done, it has caused mutation in the oral epithelium or bronchial epithelium or alveolar epithelial cell. And if there's no promoter, means something which is not promoting the cell to multiply, maybe the cell may be in a dormant phase. But the moment it will get the help of a promoter, they'll start multiplying. That's why initiators play a major role in carcinogenesis. Now promoters, they are not carcinogenic. This we have to understand. Means no promoter will actually cause mutation. And the action of promoter will be always after the action of an initiator. So promoter basically enhances the proliferation of initiated cells. Okay. So now let us see together what exactly they do. So how the carcinogenesis occur in presence of carcinogenic chemicals. So there's a normal cell. There's an initiator, as I said, means a carcinogenic chemical. The patient comes in contact with that. It leads to a DNA damage. And if there's a latent period, there's a genetic instability. Now this is a time when there is a chance that there can be a DNA repair, there can be a cell arrest, right? But unfortunately, if there's a promoter along with that, it won't allow the cell to go in a resting phase. It will force the cell to proliferate. And once the cell proliferate, the progeny will now stabilize the genetic mutation. Okay, that is a very peculiarity of our DNA. That if there's a damage to the DNA during mitosis, and if the cell cannot go in cell arrest, and once it divides, then the stable cell will no more have a DNA repair. It is taken that this is viable with life, and that mutation becomes permanent. So that will lead to a neoplasia formation. So the same thing can be explained in a chart form, that if all these are acting together. So initiators, as I said, this is the first stage in carcinogenesis. So whenever the initiator is going to act on a cell, mind well, though I say that there's a prolonged exposure needed, right? A particular dose of chemical is needed, but it is not that the DNA will be damaged bit by bit. Whenever there will be a damage to a DNA of a cell, it will always be in a phase of mitosis. When the cell is in a multiplication phase, the damage will always be sudden, it is irreversible, it is permanent. So it is not that in last multiplication something small damage occurred, in next further, then next further, and now finally one gene mutated. It is a single gene mutated in one go. Okay, but I don't know that one go will be when. That's why we say that more the duration of exposure to a carcinogen, more chances of getting that mutation in the DNA. So results after exposure to a sufficient dose. So if dose is less, it may not cause the required mutation in the DNA. So there are two types of initiators, direct acting and indirect acting. What do they mean? One chemical coming in the body doesn't require any conversion into a metabolite. Itself, it is a carcinogen. Those are direct acting. Second type of chemical that comes in body, itself it is not a carcinogen, but when it gets metabolized, so the metabolite is a carcinogen. So those are called indirect acting. So they require a metabolic conversion. So indirect acting carcinogens, their activity to cause a cancer are much dependent upon our metabolic conversion rate. That's why the individual susceptibility will play more role in indirect acting carcinogens. So the steps are like, as I said, if there's a metabolic activation required for a chemical, this is activated by P450 system in our endoplasmic reticulum. And carcinogenic potency will be determined by the balance between activation and inactivation. Like I say, the half-life of some metabolite is very less. For example, some chemical is getting metabolized and the half-life is just for 5 minutes and it gets detoxified or it gets excreted from the body. Then, in such scenario, the dose required to cause carcinogenesis may not be achieved if the rate of conversion is slow. Opposite of that, another person is having higher level of enzymes and it is converting that element fast into its active metabolite. What will happen? It attains a higher concentration for a lesser time and that will have more carcinogenic effect. That's why the genetic inheritance of metabolic activation plays a major role here. I had given an example of alcohol. So the people who are fast acetylators, problem is if you acetylate the alcohol at a faster rate, the effect which it gives on a CNS, putting up the person in a high and removing the social inhibition, that is lost. That's why fast acetylators will become alcohol addicts because they will require more and more dose of alcohol to get that same effect. But unfortunately, at the same time, the metabolite, that is acetaldehyde, is damaging the hepatocytes. So now that becomes a carcinogenic element for the hepatocellular carcinoma. Now what all these carcinogenic chemicals they have? They are reactive electrophiles, means they have a free electron in their outermost orbit. And why this is needed? Because of this, they will adduct to the nucleophilic molecules like RNAs and DNAs and other proteins in our cell. Okay, so any chemical which is electrophilic or you can say electrolytically active, having a free electron which it can share in its outermost orbit, they will act like a carcinogen and they will adduct to the DNA and RNA and share this electron and they will actually cause a permanent change in the structure. So the molecular targets, now we all of us know it very well. There are 4 groups of genes which they are going to target. So what are these genes? These are growth promoting proto-oncogenes, growth inhibiting tumor suppressor genes, genes regulating apoptosis, and genes related with DNA repair, right? And they are not single genes, there are large group of these genes which are in each of these categories. So the primary target of all these chemical carcinogens is DNA. So once the cell is initiated, means what has happened? You have caused some damage to the DNA. Okay. What is essential? It should multiply. If it doesn't multiply, then the damage is not stabilized. And if it doesn't multiply, the cell will be forced to undergo apoptosis. Okay. So it must replicate. Once it replicates, then whatever damage occurs, it becomes permanent, fixed, and it is transformed to the next progeny. So each step is equally important. Okay. So initiated cells, they are vulnerable to changes of promoters. Means a cell which has undergone a mutation because of presence of a direct acting or an initiator chemical are more susceptible to the action of promoters. So promotion of carcinogenesis, let us again revise. Promoters are those chemicals which themselves are not carcinogenic or tumorogenic. Why? Because they don't cause mutation. If they are alone present in absence of initiator, they cannot cause any tumor in the body. So we need first the action of an initiator, then only a carcinogen promoter can act. Okay, and that's why if they are not causing mutation, they cannot produce any sudden change. If they produce any kind of change in a cell, that is reversible. Okay, again they are dose and time dependent. So the action of promoter is also dose and time dependent. So what they do, they cause clonal expansion of the mutated cell. And how does they do this? Either they will act like a growth factor, or they will act like a growth factor receptor, or they will upregulate the genes which are related with growth promoters. Means genes regulating growth factors, growth factor receptors, signal transductions, nuclear multiplication genes, and genes related to cell cycle regulators. So these genes may be upregulated in presence of a promoter. Okay, so they are bystanders actually. They are not causing any adduction to the DNAs or RNAs. So by this chart, we can now understand these two different groups of carcinogens, initiators and promoters. So as I said, there is a carcinogen present in the body. What it does? It is metabolically active. It is electrophilic. It adducts with our DNA. Normally, what should happen? When a chemical enters in our body, it should get detoxified and excreted, right? This intermediate is also going to get excreted. But problem is, if it attains a certain concentration and stays for a longer period, it is going to adduct to the DNA and it will cause damage to the DNA. If the DNA repair system and your apoptotic system are intact, they will allow the cell to undergo DNA repair by arresting the cell cycle. Or else it forces the cell to undergo death. But unfortunately, if DNA repair fails, apoptosis fails, now it will allow the cell to multiply, and this is now initiated cell because it has now permanent DNA damage. Now comes the role of a promoter. If it is present simultaneously, it will stimulate the cell to proliferate. It will form a pre-neoplastic clone that will have additional mutations with each multiplication convert into a malignant neoplasm. So now let us see some examples of chemical carcinogens. So as I said, we have two groups, direct acting and indirect acting or procarcinogens. So direct acting, if you'll see, most of them are basically drugs. So the first group are alkylating agents, anti-cancer drugs. Now this is the biggest, you can say, irony or hypocrisy of oncology. Means the drug what we use to treat cancers are the drug which can induce new cancers. And why it is so? Because most of the drugs which are available today, they are non-specific drugs. Means these are the drugs which basically kill every dividing cell of our body, irrespective it is a cancer cell or it is a normal cell. And because of that, all chemotherapeutic drugs which are non-specific in action have a lot of side effects. Why? Because the fastest multiplying cells of our body are hematopoietic stem cells, followed by epithelial cells, right? So when they are going to kill the cancer cells, which cells? The cancer cells which are in mitosis, okay? So the chemotherapeutic drugs kill the cell during mitosis. They are unable to kill the cells when they're stable. That's why they will simultaneously kill our bone marrow cells, they will kill our epithelial cells. So the patients are going to have bone marrow suppression, they will have repeated mucosal ulcerations. Okay, and that's why you start treating a patient for lung cancer, you give him chemotherapy for 2 years, after 5 years he comes with leukemia. And this leukemia is a result of second kind of mutations induced by this cancer drugs. So why they cause mutations? Ideally they are focused to kill the cells, right? But if the dose achieved is less, they may be in a position to cause mutation, but they are not in a position to kill the cells. So the cell escapes killing, but goes on acquiring mutation. And now it has converted into a new neoplastic cell. Okay. The second category is acylating agents like acetyl imidazole or dimethyl carbamyl chlorides. Now procarcinogens, they are indirect acting. So all aromatic hydrocarbons like tobacco or soot, tar, pollutants, benzopyramines or methyl chloranthrins, aromatic amines and azodides like benzidines, beta-naphthalamines. So if you see these groups, they are basically industrial pollutants. So the people working in particular industries will be exposed to higher doses of these chemicals, but not all the population except tobacco and pollutants. Then natural plant and microbial products like aflatoxin B, which is coming from fungus, saffrol, betel nut, that is supari. Now supari, we all take it as a non-carcinogenic because this is a basic concept with people that supari or betel nut is not a carcinogen, only tobacco is carcinogen. Mind well, they are all, both in the same category of indirect carcinogens. Mitomycin C and actinomycin D. The miscellaneous group like asbestos, vinyl chloride, arsenic, heavy metals, insecticides, saccharine, cyclamates, nitrosamines, and nitrosamides. Now let us see what different tumors this particular chemical carcinogens they do. So we'll see just few of these examples. So alkylating agents, as I said, anti-cancer drugs like cyclophosphamide or chlorambucil, busulfan, melaphalan, these are some of the examples. Of course, the list is endless. So majority of these drugs, they have a non-specific action. They kill every dividing cell. So what they do? They lead to formation of leukemias and lymphomas. Why? Because these are the most fastest dividing cell of our body. And what I said, mutation occur during mitosis. So naturally, the cell which is multiplying at a fast rate will be more prone to the action of the chemicals or drugs during mitosis. So they will accumulate mutation at a faster rate compared to the cells which are stable or stationary. Why? Because they are not multiplying at that same pace. That's why leukemias and lymphomas are very common tumors as a side effects of chemicals and radiations. Then if you come to second group, that is tobacco, soot, tar and fossil fuels, that is polycyclic hydrocarbons, they lead to cancers of lung, skin, oral cancers and sarcomas. To come to aromatic amines and azodides like beta-naphthalamine or benzidines, they lead to bladder cancers. Azodides, which are used in foods, they are artificial coloring agents like butter yellow or scarlet red, they lead to hepatocellular carcinoma. So most of the coloring agents which are chemicals, though they are food grade, you will see that many of the products, they carry this signs that they contain so and so grade of chemical which is carcinogenic. Okay, even in US, best of the countries, not all the carcinogenic food items are banned. Okay, in India, none of them is banned except BVO, brominated vegetable oil. But even in US, more than 60 such chemicals are still used in different food products. So more you use canned foods or more you use preserved foods or prepared foods, you have more chances of getting exposed to these chemicals which are carcinogenic in nature. Few more examples of these carcinogens, like naturally occurring products, aflatoxin or actinomycin D or mitomycin C, saffron, betel nut, they all lead to hepatocellular carcinomas. Betel nuts can also lead to oral cancers because Indians are in a habit of chewing betel nuts. Then the miscellaneous category, though it is miscellaneous, but for us in our day-to-day life, these are the major group of carcinogens which we are exposed. Let us take one by one. Nitrosamines and nitrosamides. Though they sound very benign things, but mind well, all fermented food, salted foods, pickled foods, and all your soft drinks. Okay, whatever you call it, Diet Coke, a normal Coke, Mirinda, Fanta, Limca, whatever you are fond of drinking, they all are rich in nitrosamines and nitrosamides. And what they do, they lead to gastric carcinomas. So if soft drinks are your staple diet or fermented foods are your staple diet, then be alert, you may be prone to get gastric carcinomas in lifetime. Second is vinyl chloride polymer, that is plastic. Now today is the era of plastic. Each and everything packing is in plastic. Plastic is problematic when it is with contact with the hot food. So you go to parties, you go to marriages, wherever you go, nowadays you use plastic a lot for all disposable items. And what is the problem? You have served hot foods or beverages or you have served soups in these plastic containers. And that plastic which has been recycled n number of times, so it melts very easily. And just 10 nanograms of plastic is sufficient to lead to hepatocellular carcinoma. So an average Indian must be consuming at least a gram of plastic in his lifetime. So try to avoid these disposable items. Better to prefer washable dishes that are available and serve yourself food in that instead of eating foods and plastic items. Asbestos leads to bronchogenic carcinomas, mesotheliomas. Arsenical compound lead to basal cell carcinomas. Metals like nickel, lead, cobalt, chromium, which are more with battery industries and dismantle industries, they lead to lung cancers. Insecticides, now we are all consuming insecticide because of foods. A lot of insecticides are used in vegetables and fruits. That's why Europe doesn't allow export of much of the Indian vegetables and fruits because they are much 50 times higher than their FDA guidelines. So they lead to cancers in experimental animals, but even in humans today they are relating with this insecticides. Saccharin and cyclamates, again proven in animals, yet to be proven in humans. So if you are fond of drinking Coke, so you have nitrosamine, nitrosamides, and in that even you are fond of drinking Coke, which are very sweet, they are containing saccharin. None of the Coke contain glucose, okay? They have sweeteners like saccharins. Just few more slides and we'll be finishing today's. So we have promoters. As I said, promoters are chemicals which don't cause mutations. They act after the initiators. So what they do, like 4-ball esters, they will activate your kinase C. What was kinase C? These are your transduction proteins. And phenols. Now we know all our hospitals, they use phenols for wiping and for all kinds of disinfectants. So now imagine a doctor who is a smoker working in a very good corporate hospital which is completely closed with central AC duct system, and the floor is getting cleaned by phenol every 4 hourly. So there are fumes of phenols. On top of that, you are a smoker. You have a fatal combination, an initiator with a promoter. Definitely, if you get mutation, now this person has more chances of developing a lung cancer than a person who is not in this particular environment. Hormones like estrogen, if they're secreted like a premenopausal woman, now she gets endometrial carcinoma or breast carcinoma, they have receptors for estrogen. So now here estrogen, which is a simple growth promoter, it is simple growth factor, it starts acting like a promoter. So dietary saturated fat coming mainly from animal origin, they lead to promoter action in carcinoma colon. How? They stimulate the RAS genes. If you remember again RAS gene, we had seen this in signal transduction, RAS protein. So they will stimulate the mutated cell to multiply. Drugs, there are n number of drugs which induce enzymes in our body, and again they start acting like promoters. So like they can be NSAIDs, or they can be neural related drugs, or they can be diuretic drugs, they can be CNS drugs, they can be related to hypertension drugs, and so on. So there are multiple drugs. If a patient is taking those drugs, along with that he has exposure to some carcinogen direct acting, he may be more prone of developing tumors. After chemical carcinogenesis, next that is physical carcinogenesis. This is the last part of today's lecture. So when you say physical carcinogenesis, it is divided into two broad categories: radiations and non-radiations. In non-radiation, the concept is very simple. There's a chronic irritation of the tissue which compels the tissue to proliferate n number of times. Like for example, there is a stone in a gallbladder or urinary bladder, or there are some scars like burns or trauma, there's oral ulcer. What is happening? There's a continuous reepithelialization, again ulceration, again epithelialization. So the turnover of epithelial cells has increased. More the cell are going to multiply, more they will be in mitosis, more chances of acquiring mutation. So that is the basis of non-radiation carcinogenesis. So here nothing is coming from outside which will cause mutation. Only thing is you have multiplied the cell at a faster rate, putting it in a position to acquire more mutations. But radiation carcinogenesis is very different from non-radiation. In radiation, there's a single exposure. Now this is different from chemical. There's a single exposure with a lot of dose of radiation, but immediately the mutation will not manifest. So there's a latency period. Then there's a cumulative effect. Like a person is working in radiology, so he's continuously exposed to X-rays, CT scans, PET scans. Okay. So there's a cumulative effect of this radiation. Slowly they are inducing more and more mutation in the cell, something similar to our chemical carcinogenesis. The problem with radiation is they have a very strong synergistic effect with other chemical carcinogenesis. So imagine a radiologist or a radio technician consuming tobacco simultaneously. Now this tobacco will have more synergistic effect in presence of the X-ray radiations. So UV rays coming from sunlight or coming from Melder's arc, they have a definite carcinogenic effect. They mainly affect the skin. So the intensity of exposure is important, and the quantity of melanin that we have in our skin, it has a protective action. So naturally the Asians which have rich melanin skin will have less of skin cancers compared to the Europeans. Why? Let us take an example of Australia or New Zealand, the countries which are developed, which have a poor ozone layer because of more industrialization. So they have more UV radiation exposure to their skin. So they have higher rate of squamous cell carcinomas compared to Indians or Africans. Okay. Now these UV radiations which come, they have three different wavelengths. UVA, which has a wavelength more than 320 to 400, UVB, which is 280 to 320, and UVC, which is less than 280. Of all these three, UVB is carcinogenic. So when you apply all the sunscreens which protect against UV rays, mind well, they are protecting against UVA but not against B. So they are not protecting us against carcinogenic effect of UV radiations. Now what does UVB do? They form pyrimidine dimers in the DNA. They induce mutations, but their penetration is just few millimeters. Because of that, they will cause tumors of only skin. So squamous cell carcinomas, basal cell carcinomas, and malignant melanomas will occur when a person is exposed to UV radiations. So most common source is of course sunlight. So outdoor workers will have more chances of developing these cancers because of UV radiations. So what do these radiations do? These radiations will basically strike to the water molecules in our cell, and they will generate free radicals from these water molecules. These free radicals are going to damage the DNA. That is one mode. Another mode is if these are radiations coming from atomic energies, they will directly damage the DNA. So by either mechanism, it is going to cause mutation in a particular sequence of this DNA. So there will be some gene mutation getting acquired in the or accumulated in the cell. So when a cell is exposed to radiation, free radicals are getting generated. There is a genetic instability. It leads to damage to the DNA. Normal circumstances, this cell should be forced to undergo death, leading to apoptosis. If radiation is very severe, it can directly cause necrosis of the cell, or it will cause apoptosis of the cell. Unfortunately, if there is no DNA repair done, then there will be mutation in the chromosome. There will be rearrangement of the genes, or there can be inversion or translocations. Now, if it affects the somatic cells, means in adults, it will lead to carcinogenesis. If it affects the germline cells like our gonads, it will lead to hereditary genetic disorders. Okay, that's why we say that in pregnancy, radiation is not allowed. Why? Because if it affects the fetus, it will lead to teratogenic effects. So there will be anomalies in the child. So the thing to understand is radiation in pregnancy lead to teratogenicity. Radiation to gonads or germline cells will lead to hereditary disorders. But radiations in adults to our mature tissues will lead to carcinogenesis. Just a couple of slides. So last slide of today. So the ionizing radiations which we can get exposed are X-rays. So be alert, like in medicos, don't enter the X-ray rooms without proper shielding unless you are actually doing the procedures. So you don't need to accompany a patient or attendant or relative because you are getting exposed to ionizing radiations. So the gamma rays or alpha particles, beta particles, protons, neutrons, they are generated from atomic explosions. Very classical examples like in Japan, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Chernobyl atomic explosion in Russia. Till date, they are getting cancers because of those atomic radiations. Why? Because the decaying life of different particles are different. We have learned that in our basics in 12th, that some atomic things are going to decay even for decades or even centuries. So they directly alter the cellular DNA, as we have seen. They'll hit the DNA, they dislodge the ion molecules of the cell, and they result in formation of a high reactive free radicals. So they have two modes of action. Directly they can cause damage as well as through free radical generation. Now, as I said, the cells which are multiplying at a faster rate in our body will be the cell more commonly affected. That's why leukemias are most common tumors seen post-atomic bombing in Hiroshima, Nagasaki, that is Japan, and post-Chernobyl accident in Russia. Now we had the same atomic accident in Japan in nuclear reactor last year, right? Now the effects of that will be seen after 5 to 10 years. Why? Because there is a big latency period. So mind this very well. People working in radiology, they don't realize this. They may be working for 5 to 10 years and they may get tumors after 20 years. So they may fail to relate these two things. That's why leukemias and thyroid carcinomas are till date even they are occurring in those who are exposed to this kind of radiations. And in radiation therapies, what we give to the patients nowadays, we have very focused therapies today available, which are guided to very small size of millimeters. That's why no more we get radiotherapy induced cancers. But just 2 decades back, we used to give cobalt therapy to the patients where a large part of body was exposed to this radioactive cobalt, and it used to penetrate the skin, leading to basal cell carcinomas. So now today, in today's era, radiation therapy don't now cause cancers because they are focused. That is called IGRT, image guided radiation therapy, which has a precision that how deep we have to go and how much area we have to cover. So we are not exposing the other normal part of the body. So today, mean exposure of radiations is related to X-rays and the activities occurring in radiology department. Other than those who are working in, of course, industries where radioactive elements are used, like in, you can say, people working in watch industries where your dials are, they are painted with radioactive elements. Okay. As such, radiation hazard is less nowadays. So we have seen this molecular basis, we have seen chemical carcinogenesis, and we have seen radiation carcinogenesis. So that's all for today.
So the cell escapes killing, but goes on acquiring.
Thank you.
Okay, sir, shall we proceed with the quiz?
Yeah, yes, definitely.
Okay. Support team, please start putting the quiz questions.
Those who have any queries, they can type. So by that time, I can go through your queries also.
Hello, support team. Please put the quiz questions fast. We are already out of time. Okay, so here's the first quiz question. So people are very confused in this question, I feel.
Okay, they can reach a letter because you cannot genes in the group.
So your voice is breaking.
I think let us proceed to the next because they will have to go through it.
Okay, sir. No issues.
Understand
It's
it.
just about memorizing the names.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, most of them have got it correct. So we can proceed to next.
Okay.
Again, there's a bit confusion
Yes, sir.
between two choices in people. See, I repeat, chemical carcinogenesis is dose dependent, right? When you say something is dose dependent, means single exposure cannot give you that much dose. You have to have a prolonged exposure. That's what I had explained through packs of cigarettes. Okay. So single exposure in chemical cannot lead to cancers, but definitely in radiation can lead to cancers. So for chemical, I need a prolonged exposure. Next, please. So majority are correct, right? Because we are both direct acting as well as indirect acting. Both are initiators. Next one, please. Yeah, again, majority are correct. Promoters, as they don't cause mutation, they cannot cause sudden change in any cell. Next one, please. I think there's some confusion. See, simple to remember is direct acting carcinogens, okay, that are carcinogens, not pro-carcinogen. Pro-carcinogen are indirect acting. And there is only two group of drugs which are direct acting, alkylating and acylating. Rest everything falls in indirect or pro-carcinogens. So that way it is easy to remember that only alkylating agents and acylating agents are direct acting carcinogens. Rest all are pro-carcinogens. Next one, please. Yeah, majority are correct because there is a latency always in a effect of carcinogenesis by radiations. So that's all for today's lecture. If there are any queries, or if no queries, then we can call it the day.
All students, please be attentive. If you have any queries, you can write it in the chat box soon, as we are already out of time. And sir, I think this is very boring part of play. Very interesting,
Yeah.
because I feel that this is the most this is the part which is usually dragged, because it doesn't look interesting. But you made it really interesting, and I think you give good mnemonics to remember.
So
the
last thing for all the students is now the Friday will be last lecture of neoplasia. So if you have not gone through the previous lectures or your friends have joined later, you can ask them to see those previous lectures on Facebook wall of Medviz, or you can even go to YouTube and just type Medviz neoplasia Dr. Verma. You can still see those classes so that they can catch up, because last will be more of applications and diagnosis part of tumors. So see you again on Friday. Thank you.
Somebody is typing, sir. We'll
Yeah.
just wait for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I think some students are typing. Okay, it's our support team only. So I think there are no queries. So maybe either they have understood it properly, or maybe sleeping, as it was